In the frigid wilderness of Sweden, where the icy winds howled through the barren landscape, stood a humble roadside cottage. It was here that my grandfather, Lars Eriksson, a solitary and hard-working crofter, made his meager living. Little did he know that one fateful winter night, his life would be forever changed by an otherworldly encounter. The air was crisp and silent, the night veiled in an eerie stillness that sent a shiver down Lars' spine. Wrapped in his thick woolen blanket, he settled into a fitful sleep, unaware of the terrifying events that awaited him. Suddenly, a sharp knocking sound pierced through the silence, jolting Lars from his slumber. Groggy and disoriented, he dismissed it as mere imagination and tried to drift back into unconsciousness. But the knocking persisted, growing louder and more insistent with each passing moment. Reluctantly, Lars rose from his bed and stumbled toward the front door. As he approached, the knocking intensified, reverberating through the cottage like a desperate plea for entry. Hesitant, Lars pressed his ear against the ancient wooden door, his heart pounding in his chest. As Lars pressed his ears tightly with his hands, a chilling silence fell upon the cottage. The knocking had ceased, leaving him perplexed and apprehensive. With caution, he removed his hands from his ears, only to be greeted by a sound that chilled him to the bone. The muffled knocking now emanated from within his own cottage, specifically from the small, dimly lit storeroom. A sense of dread washed over Lars as he contemplated the implications. How could the knocking have moved from outside the door to the confines of his own home? What malevolent force lurked within the storeroom, yearning to break free? Summoning his courage, Lars approached the storeroom door, his heart pounding in his chest. The sound grew louder and more insistent, as if the entity trapped within sought his attention, demanding release or perhaps something far more sinister. With trembling hands, he turned the rusty doorknob, the sound of creaking hinges adding to the growing tension. As the door swung open, a rush of icy air brushed against Lars' face, carrying with it a chilling presence that sent shivers down his spine. The storeroom was cast in darkness, save for a single flickering candle that barely illuminated the space. Lars hesitated at the threshold, his senses on high alert. Shadows danced and writhed along the walls, their grotesque forms appearing almost sentient. The knocking, now more fervent than ever, seemed to emanate from a corner of the room, shrouded in impenetrable darkness. Lars summoned his inner resolve and cautiously approached the source of the haunting sound. As he drew closer, the knocking transformed into a rhythmic pounding that reverberated through his very being. Beads of sweat formed on his forehead, his breath quickened, and a palpable fear gripped his soul. Yet, driven by a mix of curiosity and a desperate need for answers, he pressed on. With a trembling hand, Lars reached out, ready to confront the enigma before him. But just as his fingertips brushed against the cold surface of the mysterious object, a bone-chilling whisper echoed through the room. "Release me," the voice pleaded, dripping with anguish and desperation. "End my torment." Just then, my grandfather woke up from his sleep, drenched in sweat. His heart pounded in his chest as he realized that someone was at the door, continuously knocking, echoing through the stillness of the night. With a deep breath, Lars cautiously opened the door, revealing the frigid night air and a figure cloaked in darkness. The stranger's face was obscured, shrouded by a tattered hood. A chill ran down Lars' spine, but he remained steadfast. "Who are you? What brings you here at this hour?" he inquired, his voice laced with a hint of unease. The stranger's response came as a whisper, carried by the biting wind. "Please let me in. I am lost and in need of shelter." Lars hesitated, his instincts urging him to exercise caution. Yet, a pang of sympathy tugged at his heartstrings. He couldn't leave someone stranded in the cold darkness of the night. Relenting to his compassionate nature, Lars opened the door wider, inviting the mysterious figure inside. As the stranger stepped across the threshold, a gust of icy wind swept through the cottage, extinguishing the flickering flames in the hearth. In the dimly lit room, Lars studied the newcomer. Their eyes glimmered with an ethereal glow, unsettling yet captivating. An air of unease settled over the cottage, as if the very fabric of reality had been momentarily disrupted. As Lars attempted to break the silence, the stranger raised a pale, trembling hand. "Thank you for your kindness," they whispered, their voice tinged with a sorrowful tone. "But beware, darkness lurks in these lands, and you have invited it inside." Confusion clouded Lars' mind as he tried to comprehend the stranger's cryptic warning. Before he could respond, an eerie stillness descended upon the cottage. The temperature plummeted, freezing the air in his lungs. Shadows stretched and twisted, morphing into grotesque shapes that seemed to pulsate with malevolence. A muffled knocking sound echoed through the walls, resonating with an otherworldly force. It wasn't coming from the door but from within the very foundations of the cottage itself. Lars' heart raced as he realized the truth. Something evil had been unleashed. In a panic, he turned his gaze back to the stranger, only to find them vanished into thin air, leaving behind an empty space and an ominous void. The knocking grew louder, reverberating through the cottage with a menacing intensity. Fear and desperation consumed Lars as he scrambled to find a way to halt the encroaching darkness. With trembling hands he retrieved a pendant passed down through generations, an ancient talisman believed to ward off malevolent spirits. Reciting an incantation he had learned from tales whispered by village elders, Lars brandished the pendant, channeling his will and faith into a desperate plea for protection. The knocking faltered for a moment, as if the unseen entity hesitated in the face of his determination. But the respite was short-lived. The knocking returned with a vengeance, pounding against the walls, shaking the very foundation of the cottage. Lars could feel the insidious presence inching closer, its intentions veiled in darkness. With his heart pounding and sweat cascading down his brow, Lars mustered every ounce of courage he possessed. He knew that he had to confront the malevolent force that had invaded his cottage. In the midst of the cacophony, Lars mustered a resolve that surprised even himself. With a firm voice, he shouted into the void, "Who are you? What do you want from me?" The knocking momentarily ceased, as if the entity were considering its response. Then, in a chilling whisper that seemed to emanate from all directions, the voice replied, "I am a lost soul, trapped between realms, seeking solace and release. I have been bound to this cottage for centuries, my tormented spirit unable to find peace.